Welcome everybody to our webinar today. It's one of a series of webinars that we have been putting together given the current circumstances that we are all experiencing at this present moment. The good news is that on this particular webinar we have 4 new expert coaches that are joining us today, and I'll be introducing them shortly for our event today. Before we introduced the coaches, and I wanted to set a little bit of context on what our event is about today. The topic of the webinar, as you know, is stop the overload, how to communicate with heart and impact. The challenges that we are all facing at this moment in time are really something that we've never experienced ever on a collective basis. There's no question that the challenges we're facing, the stress that we're going through, the ambiguity that we're coming across, and the chaos, really, with so little clarity for any of us, where there is no fault in that. It's just a state of where we are at this moment in time. There can be no question that communication is the most powerful tool that we all possess at this time. And in possessing that, we can make some assumptions that we're all very good at that. We've done it since we were young children. And so surely after many years of practicing, we should be pretty good. But the truth is that would be pretty unfair for us to assume that any one of us has got all the abilities and all the skills needed to be at our optimum communication capability, given the circumstances and the environment within which we find ourselves. So today is very much about addressing that skill of communication in the environment that we find ourselves now. We are going to be addressing questions that are coming from the environment that you yourselves are operating in. Whether that be a work from home scenario, virtual communication, and all of the elements that go around making those forms of communication effective, impactful, and how we go about as leaders and leaders of organizations, but also leaders of people, leaders of our community, leaders of our families, how we go about putting as much heart into that communication so that whatever we have to say lands and makes a difference, creating the opportunity for those around us to reconnect with the most powerful of their own states, and also with what's important to them and all of us at this time. So thank you all for joining us today. Really great that you're here, and as I say, I'm excited that we've got a number of coaches that are joining us at this time. And part of that will be that we are going to address those questions. And so questions, that's great that we've got you all here, because we want your questions live, please, today. If you have questions, or pleased to have questions, that are going to be put into the questions box. So if you look onto your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll find there your question box. Please post them in there. We have a team of people that are going to take a look through those and put them through to us so that we can address those questions. Great, so that's what we want from you. Before we get into those questions, there's 2 things I would like to do, or a couple of things I'd like to do. One, firstly, just to give you some context on who we are as WWA Corporate Coaching. So we're a coaching organization that's specialized in coaching and all the different coaching solutions that are available throughout the world. And our role has been to focus on anything from executive coaching to systemic coaching and beyond. We've got over 15 years of experience operating in this region, and we have over 40 expert coaches, a few of them that are on the screen with us today, that we're very proud, and we really take a lot of care in making sure that the coaches that we use are absolutely at the top of their game and really understand the environment within which we're working. So this is really pertinent to the environment, and now talking about whether that be Middle East, but also organizations as well. If I may, I'll start with David. That's actually what I'll do right now, because we don't have your names up here. So let me just post your names quickly, if I may, and then introduce you at the same time. So David, if I can start with you, if I may. David is an executive coach, a facilitator of leadership transformation, a licensed master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming, and accredited hypnotherapist. He is certified in transformational leadership facilitation, emotional intelligence, hypnotherapy, team effectiveness, cultural transformation, and spiritual intelligence. Previously, David worked for over 14 years for a global management consultancy firm, or a number of firms, in strategy, performance management, corporate finance, change management. And he's lived in the region for over 17 years. So welcome, David. Great that we've got you here now. If I may also then introduce you, Hatim. Thank you. Great to have you here as well. Hatim is a certified leadership coach who works with business owners and high-level executives on leadership coaching, team development, and cultural change facilitation. His coaching practice has developed from his work as a successful entrepreneur over the last 15 years in Dubai. Hatim is passionate about cultivating corporate culture that promotes employee innate creativity and motivation to bring more of their natural best selves to the workplace. That's great, Hatim. Great that we've got you here. Thank you. Helen, thank you. Helen Loveday. Helen has lived and worked in the Middle East for 14 years, has coached executives across the globe over the last 12 years, and she has a natural inclination to build trust, empathy, rapport from the very start of our coaching engagements, and has often supported executives in developing these skills for themselves through greater self-awareness of their impact on those they lead and their wider stakeholders. Great to have you here, and thank you. And finally, but certainly not least, Flo. Flo is a communication coach who helps motivated individuals to excel in their communication skills online and offline. His approach looks at both sides of the verbal communication, the content and the delivery. Through his methodology, he can take any speaker, beginner or expert, to the next level. Through his years of experience as an international public speaker, MC, and brand communications expert, he understands what it takes to connect with an audience, deliver a meaningful message, and create a memorable experience. In his coaching, he focuses on the entire range of public speaking tools, from body language, voice modulation, to scripting powerful content. So great to have all four of you here, and that's a fantastic opportunity for us to lean in to your skills and your thoughts today. So as we open, what I would like to do is just reach out to each and every one of you, and maybe I can start with you, David, today. Given that the topic that we're covering is stop the overload, with heart and impact, a little bit of feedback. So then I will mute myself. But I would like to hear what that means to you, David, and what heart and impact, and what role do those have in communication, and what is this point of overload that we're talking about right now?
Unmuted.
Great, thank you, Nick. When I think of heart and impact, I'm thinking of the heart and the brain. And while a lot of leaders are hearing nowadays that leaders should be leading with a heart, the brain is equally as important too. So a correlation that I like to make is it's kind of like with the ego and the higher self. So for me, the ego plays a very important role in our lives. It's there to make us feel loved, it's there to make us feel safe, and it's there to make us feel valued in essence. But while the ego is so important to humans, we need to push this aside, or put our ego in the passenger seat, and we need to lead with our higher self in, let's call it in the driver's seat. It's what's controlling our life. So when we communicate with heart and impact, it's not that one is more important than the other. They're both equally important. The heart is important. The brain is important too. But the brain, when we use our brain, we use it for analytical things, reports, talking, processes, etc. But in essence, we're all humans. So we need to lead with heart too, because in essence, that's how human beings communicate with each other. So right now, when we say communicate with heart and mind, we need both. We lead with the heart, but the brain is equally as important. And our topic today here about an overload of it because of what we're going through right now is certainly of essence and something we will break down and go through in this session.
Great, David. Thanks so much. I think that point of overload is absolutely right, and maybe I can lean out to you, Helen, and just set a bit of context around overload from our point of view, because it's a topic, it's a heading that we put in place because our clients are coming back to us and saying we've leaned into a new world of communicating, and already we're feeling like we're overloaded. So maybe you can give us a sense of where heart and impact sits in that space from your experience, and how you might want to sort of expand on that a little bit today. Where do we need to go?
Yeah, sure. And I think what's really important is coming back to a little bit of basics, that communication is a two-way thing. We get so caught up in, is our message being delivered correctly, that sometimes we can kind of forget to check in with that message as well and ask the questions. It's not just all the sort of the one-way telling. It's about really sort of touching people and saying, what have you understood so far? What more can I do to help? And really bringing your authentic self to work, and acknowledging the fact that it is hard. It's so important to demonstrate that empathy. You know, you could bring examples of when you've had a bad day and what you've done to get over it. And really, yeah, I think acknowledge that we all at the moment have good days, bad days, and pretty not okay days. And that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the new normal, right? So we're used to being up and solid, and we know what's going to happen today. We know what we're going for, and we're not expecting, you know, we have a bad day. That's unusual. You know, and I was speaking only to a friend this morning. He was asking me a question, you know, how are you doing? And I had to check in and say, do you know what? I am having good days and I'm having bad days. And then I'm having who knows what kind of days. But that's where we're at. And Hatim, you know, speaking into that is the new normal. And, you know, for us, we've got a huge field of communication to cover today. What's gonna, you know, what do you think we need to be addressing here around that whole area?
I believe within the name of today's topic, which is heart and impact, I believe it's important to bring both. Communication is such an imperative leadership skill, and there have been an overarching theme when it comes to great leaders that they set a direction to get things done and create quality relationships, and that applies to our communication. When we talk about communicating with heart, it's about being authentic, building trust, speaking with empathy. And when we talk about communicating with impact, are we delivering a clear message? Are we being consistent? Are we pointing towards or holding the focus towards the outcome that we want to create? So creating that balance between heart and impact is going to create a really effective communication.
Great. Yeah, I love that, the balance of those two things. And, you know, it speaks into, you know, how do we communicate skillfully? And we forget that we need both of those elements. And they may not always be skillful, but we still need those elements to show up in our communication if we're going to have the impact that we're looking for. Thank you, Hatim. Flo, lean out to you in terms of, you know, and I know you work in the space of presentations, but not solely in that space. But this is communication bottom line, right? And, you know, the whole idea of quantity versus quality, how does that show up for you in that space? I think you on mute at the moment, Flo. I'm not hearing you, so I don't know what's happened there.
Let me try again. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Apologies for that. My internet connection is experiencing some troubles. So the topic, as you said it, the overload is what I would like to start off with. I spoke to a regional managing director of a global tech company, and he has having every day 6 hours of video conferences, 6 hours of continuous conversation. And I think that already points out how much conversation and communication is going on. And that's just now all these virtual communications that we're having. On top of that, of course, there's emails and messages and. And I would like to stay away for a second from the hard part, because the other coaches have already touched so much on it. And you're absolutely right. It's about authenticity and speaking with warmth and honesty. All of that is really important. But also, on the other hand, making a real impact with your communication is now more important than ever before. And as I said, from 6 hours of communication, how many messages will you really remember? That's what you should be also thinking about and evaluating when you actually prepare a presentation. And preparation is another point that we should be talking later on as well, because before we just things and deliver about it, read about how to show it connects with the audience, and it also is a memorable communication.
Great, and I think that that's interesting around the idea of connection, because just because we're communicating doesn't mean we are connected. You know that we all believe ourselves to be great communicators on some levels at least, and in a part of the communication is listening, and yet in my experience listening is still a skill that even as a coach we can continually develop and improve further. So that's just interesting. Yeah, as you say, how much of that is landing, how open is the recipient, how ready are they to receive that. You may have got the right message, but the delivery may not be appropriate. So fantastic. That's kind of set the scene for us, and I'd like to get into some of the questions that are being posed, as I say, right now in work environments around the region. And those questions really lean into the level of concern, pain, worry, and also aspiration to do a better job. So, you know, we can imagine that this is really built on the negative elements of the drivers, but there are still, you know, everybody here is aspiring to make a difference. I know that, otherwise nobody would be here on this webinar today if there wasn't a curiosity about how can we make a step forward and do this better, do this differently going forward. So let me, maybe Helen, I can start with you. The questions come in to us today, and that question is, how can I hold a business meeting and be productive while being mindful of the issues and concerns that the entire group might be facing in these challenging times? And I guess that might be dependent on the size of group. You know, we can have a one-to-one or we can have a group, but I assume from the question we're talking about perhaps multiple people in what would likely be a virtual type environment.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of ways to look at this. There's the way you come across as a leader. You know, are you demonstrating that authenticity? Are you, speaking genuinely? Are you, how well, or what is the impact of your communication? And so that might be checking in as a group. It might be checking in individually, as you say. And I think it's an interesting time because there's quite a lot of work around psychological safety in teams, which is a really, really key part of it. And essentially it's defined as, do people feel comfortable enough to speak up and say the difficult words that need to be said? And while we sort of transition to this new way of being and everything's virtual, where even some teams who have a really good degree of psychological safety, they may have taken a step back in that. They may not have done. But I think it's so worth checking in on that side of things when you've got a group, and remembering that people may not feel comfortable speaking up. And you might have to do a little bit more sort of one-to-one stuff, just say, hey, how are things landing with you? What is your understanding of it? And I've said it already about this two-way communication, but these questions at this time are so important. It's not just about you as the leader getting your message across. It's about what is actually being perceived and understood. And the only way you can know is to ask.
Yeah, and not just to ask once, is it? Did you understand what I said? You know,
yeah,
there are
absolutely
ways that we check in. around.
And also, I think just sort of adding on to that is just saying to people, you know, what do you know already? You know, offering some power back into the room almost, because there is, I think, sometimes an assumption that you as the leader have to know the answers all the time. But that's absolutely not the case. Your people will know far more than you a lot of the time, and you really need to be sure that A, you're not wasting their time by saying something they already know, and B, checking in as to, you know, has their answer been, has your intention or your message actually been received? So what have you understood so far?
Great, and that's interesting, because what is the intent for that communication? Is it, as a leader, for me to feel a level of safety that I've told everybody the message?
Yeah.
And that could almost be like the small print, right? Well, I told you. Versus how am I engaging and getting a message over that is landing and then can be worked upon, and if not, there's a level of psychological safety that you're talking about that allows a two-way interaction, because that is going to be critical right now. If it's only going one way, and we know that the information right now is limited for everybody, and if there's an expectation that it's only going to come from above down, then we already have got ourselves into a sticky spot. Thank you, Helen. And I'd like to lean out to you, David, just to sort of roll with that a little bit as a topic around the area of you know, that you know, being productive in those type of meetings, and that, you know, we talk about psychological safety. How do we create psychological safety? What do we need to think about in those type of meetings for them?
Beautiful. I mean, building on what Helen said, psychological safety and asking is the key word. Asking is super important. A lot of times, leaders will go into meetings and they'll just go there to tell a message, right? But what we want to do is we want to ask what's going on. And there's a couple of different ways we can do this. One of them is setting agreements. So, for example, reaching out to the team before the actual communication of the topic at hand and asking them, what do we need from this session?
That's because I'm on mute. So but is it going to work without your headphones? Do you want to give that a shot?
Is this better? Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, perfect. That's great.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's forget these headphones. Sorry, I don't know what was said, what was heard, and what was not heard. So let me just start from the beginning. So just saying, building on what Helen was saying, the psychological safety and the asking part is so important. So a lot of times leaders will come into a meeting and they come in with an agenda, and they think that if I go and explain this agenda perfectly well, then everything is great and I've done my job. But a couple of things that we can use as tools is, one of them, setting agreements. So before the meeting starts and you actually start talking about the content or the topic at hand, ask what agreements are required from the group to feel that kind of comfort and safety. And the second thing would be, as Helen mentioned before about a check-in, there are many different examples of check-ins, but one check-in that I tend to like to use is 3 simple questions. You just ask, how are you feeling today? What, if anything, can get in the way of you being fully present here today? And what is your intention for today? Now, some leaders might say, our group is 30 people or 50 people. If we did this, it would take forever. But previously, you could do it in breakout groups. And nowadays, with these current technologies that we have, these platforms that we have, there are breakout sessions too. So by addressing this and then coming back to the meeting, we have a better context and understanding of what everybody is feeling. And then you can go on with the meeting. And then if there's any problems that came out or anything that you've noted, you can have separate discussions on the side to make sure that people are attended to.
And the idea of protection is so important. Again, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to have people be able to share a part of their world that traditionally maybe is not showing up in the corporate space, because we're very busy doing stuff. And there is a sense here that the new paradigm is, it's not that doing disappears to the background. That's always going to be part of the process. But actually, what is now coming more to the foreground is the being part. And how do we make human connection just through doing? It's near impossible. There's no heart in doing. It doesn't mean you don't bring heart to doing, but connection is not really an optimal space there around the doing. So the being, the checking in, and so forth. And I like the idea of the breakout rooms if you're dealing with larger numbers, 2 or 3 people with a set of questions to roll through. Simple stuff, but so powerful, and opens up that commonality of we're all in this together. We are struggling to some degree with what's going on. Thank you, David. Before I get to the next question, actually, what I'd like to do is I'd like to put a poll. I've got a couple of polls I'd like to just put out there. The first is really just to check in the type of roles that people are playing within the organization that they're working with. So let me just launch that poll for you there. So if you could just fill one of those in: executive manager, senior manager, middle manager, team leader, employee. That would be great for us to understand who we have in the room with us today. That's great. I'll just give you a couple more seconds. Great, I think we've got everything we need. And now I'll close the poll, and let's just take a look at what is showing up on that poll. Let me just share those results so that we can all take a look. So on those results, well, we've got senior leaders in the room with us today. Executive managers, senior leaders, all of us are working with relationship. Clearly, everybody's in relationship, but we're working in corporate, multi-complex relationships here. So everything that we're talking about is absolutely relevant to what you're experiencing. Great. And then what I'd like to do, based on that, I would like just to ask another question, which is really, what are the main communication challenges that you are experiencing right now? So let me launch that. And there's a number. If you look through these, don't feel that you've only got to select one of these. You can select multiple of these, because I'm curious which is there will be some of these that are showing up for everybody, and I want to make sure that we're covering the key areas, and we'll get a good idea of what people are feeling in terms of these critical areas. Wow, this is really interesting as I see the results come through. I'm just going to wait a couple more not minutes, but a little short while, because I can see still the numbers are changing as we just check in with multiple options. Great, so I'm going to close the poll now. Thank you for that. And then we get a chance just to take a quick look at what those results are. And this will be interesting for you as well, team, as we communicate that. So these areas, the first one, communicating bad news at 14%. Interesting, at 14%, very interesting. Keeping up team morale up at just around 70% of the people in the room are saying that that's an area of, that's our top area. How do we maintain morale? Then the area of setting boundaries. So, the new work environment of work from home and the boundaries, and we may address some of those things today. That's at around 31% of you interested in that. And then how do we maintain team productivity and focus? Yep, absolutely. We're in organizations that are results driven. And so that's not going to go away, and nor should it. But that clearly is something that we still need to address on an ongoing basis. And then managing our own anxiety. So 17%, that's again, I'm interested, I'm curious about that. Knowing that, for myself in these places of, I'm also leading a team, and, you can have those moments where you question a lot of things, and how do you manage that in your own moment? Now, well and good, I'm sure. So team, I'm certainly interested. I'm going to put that out I'm going to hide that now so that we can come back into the room. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts, maybe, Hatim, on what you've seen there. In terms of this morale. keeping team morale, that's right up there. What should we be thinking about in those spaces? You're muted at the moment, Tatim. Sorry, that was my fault. Let me unmute you. There we go. Thank you.
Now I'm unmuted. I believe it's very normal with the disruption that's going on that the morale of people are affected. There is a level of challenges that they're facing at home, and there's that level of uncertainty of maybe their own job security, what's going to happen to their families. So their own personal kind of anxieties are showing up. Now, how to go about that? There's a couple of things that we can do to increase morale. First of all, it's important that we connect with people at a personal level, to have as much as possible interpersonal communication. Connect with people, have as much how are you conversations as you can, whether it's in a group or one-to-one. Second thing, let them know how they're making a difference. I mean, I've seen this article on CNBC that Oprah said, you know, almost every person that I interviewed asked me, did I do a good job? So you can lift morale up by letting people know, acknowledge how they're making a difference, whether it's what they're bringing, maybe their composure, maybe their sense of humor, maybe their resourcefulness. So it's important to acknowledge what they're doing good and how it's impacting it. The third way you can also increase morale, you know, the facts don't change. Whatever narrative we create around it is very subjective. We always create a story about the facts that are happening. So it's always important as a leader not to give false promises, but to give a resonant meaning to what's happening. It could be that, look, guys, we're going through a challenge and we're all in this together. We all want to cross this bridge to the other side. It's going to make us stronger. So giving that sense of a resonant narrative instead of having a negative narrative, a resonant narrative for people to have their mood lifted.
I love that word, resonance. And you know, if we're talking about heart here and how that vibration of, you know, our communication, and how when we are able to create resonance between not just one and two people but within a group, how suddenly the connection increases massively. And so how do we find things that connect us versus separate us? That, you know, just absolutely beautiful. And that's where morale, one of the areas that morale is generated, right? Am I doing a good job? Am I, you know, I want to feel like I'm a productive and useful member of this team, and yet I don't feel maybe that I'm at my best game. I've got, you know, I'm sitting in my lounge, I've got kids running around, I'm trying to answer maths questions, and at the same time, you know, I'm also having to discuss what's going on for dinner tonight. You've got it all going on. Those were conversations that you were not necessarily party to until you got home, but now there's an ongoing engagement in those things. And so, you know, that's really interesting. Thank you, Tim. Flo, I'd like to lean out to you and just, again, go with that area of morale. You know, what is it that leaders perhaps can be doing in their communication? Because we're all communicating through this virtual interface right now. And yet that has not been something we've been traditionally particularly used to doing, and we may not be as skillful as we'd like. Maybe what some of the things that leaders need to be thinking about here in terms of that communication, the form, and what needs to change to create that morale or work with that morale.
I would like to answer this question actually with one simple word. They should be thinking about creativity in their communication. So as a leader, you should maybe create an amazing pep talk or mini inspirational speech that you write and deliver to your employees. I mean, look out through all the communication that you will find with leaders to their teams. It's always quite negative. It's always just giving the facts. But where's this great, inspiring Steve Jobs kind of speech that you want to see on the internet where everybody just goes like, wow, that's a leader who actually got it. And of course, Hatem, you already mentioned it. Get your team to collaborate and show them that you care. That is absolutely a must. But create amazing messages and do that via video. And it's not just video conferences. For example, there's a great app, Video Ask. It's by Typeform. Simple app. What you can do is you'd get out your phone, you would record a quick message, and then you can share a link to the entire team. And they can then respond with a text, with a video, or a multiple choice. So that's another great way as a leader to engage with your team in a different sort of form, and that will also not take that much of your time. But it's, again, communication. And last but not least, I would offer you another opportunity to engage with your team by look around. Instagram, TikTok, all of these young platforms, what do they have? Challenges. And everybody loves challenges. So why not set a cool challenge for your team?
We lost you there, Flo. I think you're going to come back just in a moment. So I know that I don't want to cut you short. I'm going to wait for your internet connection to pick back up with any luck. Nope, I think we may have lost you, but so I'm getting a sense that you know what Flo is talking about really is that there is a number of apps, creativity elements, and so let me lean out to the rest of the crowd here. Maybe David, I can speak out to you. What are some of the things that we can help in terms of this creative engagement piece? You know, I know you work with numerous leaders around the region. What are you seeing, or what are you actively encouraging them to seek out in terms of that particular interaction?
Well, it's building a little bit on the storytelling part that Flo was going into. So what I find is that to increase morale, it's really good to tell tales of people who've endured very hard times, because then they can relate to these stories. And these metaphors, they're so powerful. If you can show a scenario that happened in the past and how people endured and got through it, then people will have increased morale. The other thing too is that we're very challenged now because we're all behind screens. So, you know, these, like Flo was trying to say about Steve Jobs before, people were live in the audience, watching his presence, watching his body language. And if we look at, for example, the Mehrabian model of communication, we see that 55% of communication is about body language, right? It's only about 7-8% that are about the words that you use. So by using this body language, by leaders, even behind the screen, being engaging, being motivating, using their tone of voice, they can really impact people's morales. So I would say those two things. Tell good tales and really use that energy and that body language to increase people's morales.
Sorry,
That's it.
so Flo, I was reaching out to you again just to see if you've got something you want to add on to what you've said. We kind of closed it off with David from what you started there in terms of sort of inspirational messages and some of the tools that you were talking about. Was there anything else you wanted to add into that?
What I wanted to add in the terms of creativity is to create creative challenges and competitions. And that could be something fun as you see it on the platforms, Instagram, TikTok, could be a fun dance challenge, could be eat 2 lemons where a leader just makes a little bit of fun and gives the audience a good giggle and their team. But it could also be something work related. Put on a problem, let the teams with each other come up with ideas and solutions, and then create kind of a virtual Shark Tank, where you have actually then a jury that will look at the different solutions and make it exciting, right? If you have to do these virtual communications and you want to engage the team, then do it in a great way. And there's so many great examples out there that you can really take and learn from.
Great. And you know, I know that one of the things, there's a large consulting firm out there, and you know, we worked closely with them over a number of years, and they are talking about, well, they have set up numerous different groups within their organization. Now, clearly, it depends on the size of the organization you've got, but they've got groups built up around specific topics or ideas or commonality, whether that be women in leadership, or around certain religious groups, or around hobbies, or around, you know, how to lighten, you know, the heaviness of the day. And I think they were even sharing things like, you know, your favorite, you know, pet photo and so forth. You know, people are sharing a little bit more of themselves. So many people have pets. And, you know, there's such a deep connection with pets. So if you're able to relate to that, then again, you're building a bridge to the people that are around you that perhaps you didn't have the opportunity to build in the past. Thank you, Flo. I'm gonna move. Well, I want to move to the next question. The question I had actually was absolutely around morale. So that's, you know, that's really nailed, or at least has allowed us to speak about how to keep up morale, which was up at 69%. Then I know the next element there was around maintaining team productivity and focus. Why don't we speak into that? I've got a number of questions here, but I think that perhaps that as an area may address a number of them. And so maybe, Helen, I'd like to start with you, if I may, around this idea of sort of, you know, productivity and focus. We've talked about heart and impact, and I guess there's clearly, you know, a balance in there somewhere along the line, but we do have to deliver results. And, you know, what should we be thinking about in those terms? Sorry, Helen, I've got you on mute. That's my fault. Let me unmute you.
Thank you, Nick. So it's interesting when those two polls came up that were the two highest. I think there's a definite correlation here between the morale and the productivity. And I think one of the questions that leaders are sometimes a little afraid to ask is something along the lines of, how can I help? Or how can I be most useful to you? Because there is a fear, I think, that they're going to say, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, I need you to do this, I need you to do that, and I need you to do the other. And so we sort of maybe hesitate a little in offering that help. But studies show that that question rarely has that response. People realize that they start to realize they are more capable. And the request for help might be something as straightforward as, you know what, I need another 24 hours to deliver that report. And that's such an easy thing for you to say yes to. And it could give such a boost to that employee. So I think that could actually, while it feel like it might feel a little counterintuitive and that it wouldn't boost productivity, I think a simple question like, how can I help, or how can I be most useful to you, could really, really help, because it will make people realize that they're not as stuck as they think they might be, or that you'd have to be the one to step in to help. And on that sort of, and essentially it is a coaching approach, which of course is something we could all talk to all day. But taking it, I think it's one of those tools that are potentially in leaders' toolboxes that they've forgotten about, because it does feel a little one-directional. Some of the people I've been speaking to feel that it has gone a bit one-directional rather than being two-directional or two-way. And so just asking, you know, what resources do you have already that could help you with this? And it could take that sort of strength-based approach. When have you faced something similar in the past that you can draw on from your own experience? Could be really, really empowering for that, and I think could really add to the productivity side of it.
Thanks, Helen. I think the idea here that we are all feeling a level of stress and pressure that we have not felt before, and that's almost, it's obviously partially related to the new forms of communication, but certainly to the new environment we find ourselves in. And we alluded to it a while ago, and 33% of the people saying, look, this whole work from home boundaries thing, how do we address that? And I think that also leans into this idea of the pressure we put on ourselves. And I'm going to use a very quick, I'm not going to use an example. I'm going to lean out to Hatim. Maybe you can give us some sense here. I've got an example that's to do with my son's homework. And
when it comes to setting boundaries between, when it comes to home and working from home, yeah, Nick, this is what you're referring to.
It might also be the pressure that we're putting ourselves under, that we feel that we've got to operate at the same level of effectiveness and productivity that we've been operating over the years. And we may not be allowing ourselves the moment to appreciate how much the world has changed. And actually that's going to have an impact on us. And so what you speak into, Helen, is there's a sense of permission here, right, from the leader. And maybe that's something we want to speak into a little bit there, Hatim, or there's another idea that you have.
Yeah, when it comes to, I believe it's very important, as Helen said, that we need to offer our help as leaders, and we need somehow to give permission for people to ask for help, because asking for help is a very vulnerable thing for people to do. And there needs to be enough psychological safety created, enough trust that I can say, you know what, there's a place where I might have made a mistake, or I don't know, or I might need help in that. And that requires a foundation of psychological safety. And there's something that a lot of, when you want to talk about productivity, you really want to talk about the real issues. And the real issues are really spoken to when there is enough trust in the space.
Great, yeah, and you're absolutely right. And a part of our challenge is that trust is not built in a moment, but there are lots of things we can do, micro things along the way, right? Throughout the interaction, we're interacting with lots of people, continually, and each of those micro interactions will have an opportunity to develop that trust. But I love this idea of permission, right? And I know that when you create a space where you allow that vulnerability and create it in a safe space, so that it has the opportunity to show up and not work against the individual, is very powerful.
And I think sorry. I think if I could just share a very live example, is that before we came onto this webinar, we were all, well, I know I was feeling a little bit anxious, a little bit nervous, and I think sort of sharing that with the group really sort of helped everybody else, and there was some lovely reassurance going around that this is just a conversation and an opportunity to bounce ideas off each other. So that's a really live example of what being a little bit vulnerable but how it can go towards building trust can really help.
Great, Helen. I've got a live question come in from Maya, and I want to address it because it really leans into what we're talking about here. It's, what indicators should we look at to raise the flag if there's a communication overload? So yeah, how do we know there's a communication overload in those around us? David, maybe I can lean out to you for your thoughts on that, and then Flo, I'll come in to you.
Sure. One thing that I always love to say is that as humans, we like to generalize because it makes it easy on us. So when we think about what our communication overloads are and how can we reduce them, it all depends on what's going on with your team. So there could be many different factors of why everybody is overloaded. Is it too many meetings? Is it too much work assignment on top of the meetings? So we need to ask our teams. That's basically what we need to do. We need to listen. And Nick, I know you said earlier before that listening is such an important attribute of people, leaders, coaches, and even us as coaches, we do it full time, but we can still learn more and more and more. So my answer would be listen. Listen to what your team has to say, find out why they are overloaded, and then take it on a case-by-case basis and see what can you do to change that.
Yeah, and just to leverage, and this is not a sales pitch in any way, but coaches, lean out to a coach and say, I need to work on my listening skills, and get a couple of sessions with a coach. There's hundreds of good coaches out there that are ready and waiting to help leaders just even on a micro basis, to lean into these skills, because there are some simple skills that you can leverage and understand very, very quickly, and it can make such a huge difference. Thank you, David. Flo, I'd like to sort of ask you, I mean, you working with groups, you traditionally at the front of the audience, and you have to read an audience. How do you know that you've gone into communication overload?
Well, you said it already, active listening by re-observing the audience and keeping an eye on them. And then, of course, on the other hand as well, preparation. And what I see happening right now a lot is many people are just treating virtual communication as if it was another face-to-face meeting. But the problem is you're staring at a screen for an hour, and then afterwards for another hour, and then another hour. And even though the people change, I'm always staring at a screen, the same window. So if you're just doing one communication after the other and it's all the same, I'm sorry, it's very difficult to not be overloaded. So if you prepare well, go the extra mile, use a few tools, whether it's polls, whether it's videos that you share, whether it is another quiz that you do. There's so many cool, amazing, creative ideas and tools out there that you can use. And then you really change up the communication and you make sure that people don't get into that overload. And of course, as David said it as well, you need to check in with the team and you need to ask the audience, did you actually get that? Is it too much? That's so important.
Great. Thank you, Flo. That's good, because I know you've got some experience in working in those large group environments, and reading the audience. We talk about that. I mean, that would make sense, right? We think of that in terms of, I'm making a public presentation. What we are forgetting is that now we have to read the audience virtually. So what, in reading the audience virtually, what are some of the things maybe that may show up differently to reading the room differently, literally? Or are they the same?
Well, I mean, it's very interesting that you say that. When I do a webinar, I always make a conscious effort and conscious decision sometimes to just check on the attendees and see what they are and have a look at their body language. And if I see that somebody was first facing me and now suddenly he's sideways, I know that he might be checked out and looking at his phone right now. And if you never actually do that extra effort, going that extra mile, then how would you know? You really have to observe the audience, and sometimes also just hold, maybe do a pause. Don't even say something for a few minutes, do the Barack Obama pause, and then ask them, if you are in agreement with me, raise your hands, do some interactions that are just out of the ordinary, and that really can help you to get your communication across.
Oh yeah, that physical interaction, just calling people into being literally an active part of the communication. Great, that's really good. I mean, all four of you, I'm counting myself here, but 4 of you, really great to hear your thoughts today. Rather than go to another question, knowing that we've got 6 minutes left, what I would like to do is just kind of go and try and bottom line some of the things that each one of you has felt perhaps would really serve into all of the areas we've talked about. And clearly, there's a lot of ground we could have covered today, and it's sad that we couldn't cover all of it. But what are the key takeaways from your own perspective? And maybe I could start with you, Hatem, go to you, Helen, David, finish up with you, Flo. How's that?
I mean, we're really living in a challenging times, and I think it's challenging our way of communication, and we can take this as an opportunity to develop our communication level with all the challenges that we're facing. Always when I'm trying to get to know people better, I go like, what's a turning point in your life? And they always go back to a time where they had a challenge and they overcome it. So this could be a turning point in the way you communicate with people to take it to the next level.
Beautiful.
Or to all of us, of course.
Absolutely. What an opportunity. And those opportunities don't always come wrapped in a nice way. And but nonetheless, it's an opportunity, or at least it's a call to action, and perhaps different action. Thank you, Hatem. Helen.
Yeah, I think this topic of just being human and acknowledging that it is hard is so important. Asking for help. People often shy, like I said, people often shy away from that, both from asking how you can help and asking for help themselves. But it's, as a leader, it's a wonderful way to role model, to ask for help. And that way, you know, Flo's introduced us to some fantastic tools. You don't have to be the expert on those tools. You can go to somebody who loves tech and loves that, and you can ask for their help with it. And trust me, that person will be delighted to help. And equally, if just that very simple question, how can I help, would, I think, do so much towards building trust and just showing that you are human. I think that's such an important part of it at the moment.
Great, yeah, human element, heart. How do we bring that in? And it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be difficult. And you know, just to stay on that just for a moment, because I know there's a lot of people a lot of leaders that are in their positions because they are technically very, very good. And that's not to undermine their people capabilities, but that's their go-to. There's a very strong technical go-to in the leadership within this, well, not just within this region, but certainly. And so it's not a natural space for a large majority of leaders to go to. And in the old world, in the old paradigm, that was kind of okay. We could get by and we could still deliver. But the new paradigm is that it's going to be very, very difficult for us to get the same productivity and focus if we can't make that heart connection. And I think the point there is that it doesn't have to be difficult. There are some simple and not necessarily time-consuming, they don't have to be time-consuming ways. So on that note, I'm going to go to you, David, if I may, and just, you know, if you want to take that topic or just get a sense of what's showing up for you in our session today.
What I love the way you just said, you know, leaders think that we can just get by, right? And the whole point is we're not trying to just get by. Organizations are changing faster than ever. We need to become more agile. We need to respond more quickly. And something that we were discussing earlier is that, you know, we're focusing right now on the COVID times, but a lot of what's necessary in the COVID times were necessary pre-COVID times and will be even more necessary in post-COVID times. We're not just talking about right now. So one skill, you know, reflecting on the heart again, like we said earlier, is create safety, set agreements, listen to the voices of the people. And from there, you will go in a direction that you've never gone on before, and you will not simply just get by, you will really excel.
Great, thanks, David. Flo, really like to hear your thoughts as we sort of wrap up today. We've got you on mute again. You'll have to.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to hear any of my. Unfortunately, my internet connection is today very unstable, so I wasn't able to hear any of you guys. So I hope I'm not going completely in the wrong direction. But for me, can you hear me now? Excellent. So for me, one of the takeaways here is, and it also shows up in the surveys, that right now, I believe that leaders that are obviously already good communicators, because that are a leading position, and also if you are somewhere else in the management or in the employee curve, you should right now make a conscious decision to step up your communication effort. And whether that's through creativity, whether it's through leading by example, using your heart, being empathetic, being authentic, there's so many different ways. But I think for me, the biggest takeaway is it's now the time to step up your communication effort to make sure that you are actually delivering the best possible communication for your team, for your clients, and for anybody around you, because that's what the world and everybody needs right now, this very moment.
Great, thank you, Flo. And if I was to wrap up my own thoughts, and certainly this is not by any means all of the points we've come across, you know, I want to lean into that how do we balance that heart and you know, productivity, you know, positivity and productivity almost, you know, so that we're able to engage the hearts and the minds of the people that we work with, and not just because it's good for business, but because it's good for humanity. It's good for us as human beings to connect. And, you know, to feel that resonance is, you know, we don't go to work to earn money. I mean, if you know, I think it comes out at the end of the day, most people are not in the workspace. Yes, we want to earn money. That's a necessary outcome, but it's not the primary reason that we go to work. At the end of the day, we're human beings. We want to connect. We want to have the opportunity to serve and make a difference. And when we work in forums with leaders that provide that opportunity, then that is a wonderful way to come to work and be part of something special. And everybody wins from that. So that was some of the things that certainly from my side I want to take away. So just as we close up today, I just want to do one last thing before I thank everybody, is that, you know, as a small call to action really, that, you know, we are coaches, and whether you come to us as an organization or you go to other coaches, that is not important to us. What is important is that this is a resource that we strongly suggest you take a look at in ways that you can strengthen your communication ability, your clarity, and, you know, how you show up in these spaces in a very short period of time. And coaches are skilled at helping you to do that. So look at that as a possible resource. I want to thank my coaches. Thank you, Hatem. Thank you, Flo. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, David, for your time today. It's so cool to talk to you all. I want to thank you all for coming along and joining us today. And we look forward to welcoming you back for our next webinar. We'll let you know what's going to happen in a similar forum. But thank you all for joining us today. Take care, and we'll connect with you again very soon. Thank you.